always love it when the religious make excuses for why young people in particular are rejecting their religious nonsense in droves. They pretend that it's somehow a problem when, in reality, it's one of the greatest developments in social improvement in the past 50 years. But hey, let's see what a crazy fundamentalist preacher on Fox News has to say on the subject. This ought to be good.
So speaking of millennials all morning long, are they losing their faith? According to a Pew study from 2014, 34% of young people identify now as atheists, agnostic, or no religion at all. That's up about 10% from 2007. Just gives you a sense of the trend.
Mm-hmm.
And you say that like it's a bad thing, which it's not. But this isn't just a trend among millennials. Virtually all groups are seeing an increased rejection of religion in the West. In that very same 2014 survey, it was shown that between 2007 and 2014, the number of people who reported being religiously unaffiliated rose from 16 to 23%, and those who outright rejected a belief in any god rose by 3% overall. So this is clearly a trend in the right direction.
Our next guest is a pastor who is warning actively that millennials are on the verge of losing all knowledge of God and faith.
Meaning, if the trend continues, he's going to lose his cushy job. Yeah, cry me a river.
Joining us now with more on what his organization is doing to combat this trend is Director of RC College Prep and Crosspoint Community Church, Pastor Mike Shepard. Pastor, thanks for joining us this morning. So, I mean, that's a number that would surprise a lot of people. And what is the reason this trend is happening amongst younger people?
Well, I'll answer. It's because we're finally at a tipping point where religion has nothing of demonstrable value to offer the world, and we can use science, logic, and reason to realize that religion has nothing but empty claims and blind faith in things that has no means to prove are true. And since millennials are, in general, the most educated generation we've had so far, they finally possess the tools to realize that religion is just idiotic. But let's see what the pastor has to say.
Yeah, it's not news anymore. It's old news that seemingly no young adult possesses a biblical understanding of who God is. Somewhere around 6% of adults have what we call a biblical worldview, which is interesting because 90% of Americans still believe that God exists. So,
yeah, not so much. And you notice that he says that only 6% of Americans have a biblical worldview. And I've got no idea where he gets that figure, because I went looking and there's no Christian sects that have close to 6% of the population. I mean, historically black Protestant churches are around 7%, but I really don't think he's talking about that for some reason. So he's just playing the "you don't believe what I believe, so you're wrong" card.
The question, why don't they do that? I think it's two-part.
And I bet neither part gets anywhere close to reality. Let's watch.
One, they have not been taught faithfully by the older generations, and neither have the older generations lived faithfully.
And it's a swing and a miss. In other words, they haven't been properly indoctrinated to believe blindly and not ask questions, and neither have their parents. Oh, the horror!
So younger Christians don't know what Christianity is, much less why it's true.
And they haven't seen that it's true, because it's not. But that's something I'm sure the good pastor here won't acknowledge, because he's buried neck deep in Christian fanaticism. And that's kind of the point. People who have embraced a belief system are more likely to defend that belief system against any detractors, because they've got an emotional investment in maintaining that belief system. I mean, ardent communists would defend all of the evils and shortcomings of communism because they care more about communism than they do about the outcome of communism. So that's not a surprise.
And they've not seen from an older generation an authentic lifestyle. I mean, what's the good that is coming from Christianity? And then the cultural attack that exists reinforces that, saying Christianity is irrational and it's immoral, and young adults can't see otherwise because they don't know that God exists, why they should believe that, and they've not seen a pure form of Christianity lived out amongst their parents and grandparents and the broader adult Christian community.
And there he goes again, just assuming that Christianity is good, without actually addressing the serious problems that exist within it. Because there's no evidence that God exists, whether he wants to believe it or not. Because Christians are not better people than non-Christians, and certainly not better people than atheists. But he's living in an irrational fantasy world where he thinks these things are true, and no one from the outside can see it.
You only have 27%, I think, according to research, that actually go to services. I'm a millennial. I think about what religion a lot of my friends exist with, or what religion they belong to, and it's their iPhones oftentimes. I mean, people just sit on their technology all day long. You could argue that maybe that's a way to connect with the religious community, but in a lot of ways, you're disconnected from it all.
While there might be something to that, I mean, I know that there are a lot of people, millennials and otherwise, that have to be connected 24/7, 365. I've had people at work that literally started hyperventilating when they were not allowed to check their Facebook status a dozen times an hour. And that's a psychological problem that certainly has to be addressed. But your cell phone isn't a replacement for religion, and at least your cell phone is real. At least there are real people on the other end. That's not something you can say about religion. It's a community of fanatics all talking to themselves. As unhealthy as cell phone fanatics are, if you think religion is any more healthy, you got problems.
Yeah, one of the things, technology is great, but one of the things that the smartphone has done is it's isolated us. Mm-hmm. And one of the things we find with the younger generations is an epidemic of loneliness. And so certainly through the smartphone and all of its promises and social media of connectivity, what it's actually done is broken that down. And we've actually seen that in the church. You're exactly right. Fewer and fewer people come to church. But again, it's because when they do go, they're not finding anything of substance. The younger generations, the millennials, are passionate people. They can sniff out BS a mile away. And so when they come to church, they want to be taught, why does this matter? How can I know that God exists? And what does that mean for me and my communities? And by and large, when they go to churches, they don't get that. They get some form of moralistic, therapeutic deism.
Well, you are right that by and large, they can sniff out BS. And that's all that churches, indeed all that religion, offers. And it isn't just how the message is taught, it's the very message itself. Christianity, indeed all religion, teaches irrational things that cannot be supported with objective evidence. And that's the problem. How you teach that irrationality doesn't stop it from being irrational. It's like flat earthers. I don't care how you spin the flat earth message, you're still talking about something absurd and idiotic, unsupported by any evidence whatsoever. The spin isn't the problem. The beliefs are the problem.
You're talking about sort of believing churches for sure. But what are the civic consequences of this? Our founders talked about how free republics are for, only maintained through religious peoples. You believing in something greater than yourself. What are the consequences we see in our society when we have less people who believe in something greater than themselves?
You don't have to believe in imaginary friends to believe in something greater than yourself. In fact, believing in gods only makes the individual small and powerless and weak. It makes people think that they can't make a difference. All they can do is live on their knees and exhort some imaginary man in the sky to do all the work. And that doesn't actually accomplish anything. Churches are just giant circle jerks. It's all pointless.
Well, you certainly can see that for a free society to flourish, there has to be a moral undergirding. Moreover, there has to be a belief that truth exists, because if it isn't absolute and there's not something that is objective outside of us that we can all discover, all that's left is power. If truth is up for grabs, so to speak, that we can make it to be whatever we want it to be, then the person who has the most power is the one that can conform society to their own wishes. And so when our founders recognized that there was an objective part of reality, that there is something like objective truth and endowed rights that we all have, that provides the pathways for a free and civil society where we can freely disagree, discuss ideas, but it be done with respect, gentleness, and even a common good in mind.
Yeah, because Christians are well known for their respect for those they disagree with, right? I mean, historically, they haven't penalized or outright murdered non-Christians, right? I mean, they've been really tolerant of, gays, right? They haven't passed laws denying the rights of atheists to hold public office, right? But that's because they've been historically in power, and now that they're no longer in power, they're finally realizing they can't just force their will on the world around them. They can't just torture people until they profess belief in their imaginary friends. They can't just socially ostracize people who find their beliefs absurd. They can't fire you from your job because you go to the wrong church or no church at all. No, today they actually have to play on a much more even playing field, and they're finding out that not only don't they know the rules, they don't even have a ball to play with. So all they can do is complain.
And teaching you some selflessness. I love what you said, believing in something bigger and better than yourself, which I think only helps out any community. Pastor Mike Sherrard, great to have you with us.
Yeah, Pastor, thank you very much. Otherwise, it's the Leviathan of big government. You have to rely on some, its power other than an internal compass.
But you're not talking about an internal compass here. You're talking about something external to yourself. Big God is no different than Big Brother. The last thing you people want are people considering the ramifications of their own moral choices and deciding for themselves what the best path forward is. You can't control people like that, and that's what this is all about. Control. Demanding everyone obey a moral authority is taking that control away from the people and consolidating it under a religious dictator. Do what we tell you to do, or else. Because we're the official mouthpieces for this unknown and unseen God that we tell you about. And Christianity desperately wants that power back, whether the individual Christians are honest about it or even know what they're demanding or not. The clergy want power. They want influence. They want money. That's how religion is structured. And when you follow those things, you find some fat cat at the top in a golden throne living the life of luxury without offering anything of substance in return. That's religion, folks. Don't let anyone tell you differently. And I think they know that their position of power has been threatened, and they're fighting back the only way they know how. Dishonestly. But really, isn't that what we all expect?
Everything changes.